single biggest mistake investors make looking at India is to say that, oh, it's 1.4 billion people.
This is the 1 Point Podcast, and today's episode is with Sajith Pai from Blume Ventures.
This 1.4 billion population can be split into three Indias. The India 1 is really the consuming India. Really. That's the Indian you see in malls, using Apple iPhones, watching Netflix, drinking Starbucks, etc. There's about 10%. And they have per capita income of, I think, $10,000 to $15,000. India 2, they work as Uber drivers, urban company, staff coming home and doing a beauty treatment for you. Their incomes tend to be a lot more precarious than India 1. This one is 300 million large and has a per capita income of $3,000. India 1 is a mini US, but India 2 is very distinct. So how do you cater to them? For instance, one of the founders of Dream 11 made a very interesting comment. He said that when Dream 11 says when you cater to India 2 or Bharat, you shouldn't charge 300 rupees a month. Instead, he said you should charge 10 rupees every day for 30 days. You will have a lot more customers. So the very distinct models emerging, and I think over the next 5-6 years, we're going to see more and more of these models.
This is the 1 Point Podcast, and today's episode is with Sajith Pai from Blume Ventures, and this is part of a special India series. And Sajith needs no introduction in the Indian context, by the way. So his tweets on the Indian founders, product market fit, and what is happening in the VC circle, comparing that with the US and other ecosystems, are quite famous. So everybody knows him. I will just get right into it and ask him the first question, like, what is Blume Ventures?
Yeah. Bloom, it is named after the German word bloom for flower, but we pronounce it bloom, but that's completely fine. We are a seed to Series A fund, and we have AUM of around $800 million. We started out as a micro VC, pre-seed fund. And given our success, given the growth of the Indian venture ecosystem, we've transitioned from a pre-seed VC to a seed to A VC. Okay, you could think of us as the closest parallel would be like a USV of India. I mean, I've heard that before. I'm no way claiming to be anywhere near USV's track record, but sort of in the positioning of being a thesis-driven investor, have a lot of writings around us, etc. So I think, and so that's Bloom. About 5 partners spread across Bangalore. One partner in SF, one partner in Delhi, and one partner in Bangalore. So we have presence across India. We invest all sectors, barring a few sectors such as real money gaming, sin sectors, okay, which typically we want to avoid, given the preference of our LPs and us too. We're sector agnostic. So that's a bit about us.
Sajith, you published this year a phenomenal report, very insightful report titled Indus Valley Report 2025. And you have been doing this for quite some years. So you are insight first investor, if I may say, right? What are the top 3 structural trends that you see happening till 2030, which are the most important and that you would like to highlight?
Yeah, I would say that an important trend that we are seeing clearly is, and there's no one word, the most convenient word is a word which is called Atma Nirbharta, which is self-sufficiency, but it's not the right word. It also means sort of a little bit of patriotic element, etc. coming in. And this word, Atma Nirbharta, which is sort of guiding the Indian political and governing class, and they want, for example, self-sufficiency to come in, is really driving many trends. So they want to be self-sufficient in defense. They want India to have a very strong manufacturing economy, etc., etc. So that leads to really the improvement in infrastructure that we're seeing. That leads to a defense procurement. That leads to a manufacturing renaissance. So all of this is underway. So this is one important trend. The second one is really a long-term trend of India moving from the unorganized to the organized, to the informal to the formal, to the unbranded to the branded. Okay, this trend will accentuate even further. The third really is AI, the rise of AI, and its second order effects. And not all of it is necessarily going to be welcomed in India, because the Indian economy is rife with unemployment, youth unemployment specifically, educated unemployment. And we have actually covered this in the Indus Valley report, where we've actually seen how, as you go from the less educated to the educated, unemployment increases. We also have a flourishing service economy. And if AI is going to come in and replace, and that's how AI is structured, right? It's much easier to do intellectual work using AI than physical work, right? What does it mean for the Indian economy? So there are going to be lots of ripple effects. These are the three structural long-term trends that I'm seeing, and they're going to get accentuated over the next 5 years.
Okay. So when we talked about the first one, which is Atma Nirbharta, right?
Yeah.
This trend of looking bit of inwards,
Yeah.
if I may be politically correct here, is going through the entire economy. So it's going in the US, bring back home the manufacturing. It's going in Europe because of what's happening in the Russia and the Ukraine side. So all of those economies, the bigger economies of the world, are kind of facing the same dilemma and the same, let's say, challenges, or another word, opportunities. How is the Indian context different here? And how is this opportunity manifesting itself?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think all of us in India are worried about the AI rails being pulled out under you. Okay, because we've seen some of the challenges that come to countries which can get debanked. These are, of course, rogue countries, and I fair to say that it's sometimes perhaps welcome to see some of these countries being debanked from the SWIFT system. But what happens if tomorrow your interests don't align with the West's, and the West decides to pull out the AI rails under you? So it's sort of saying that you don't have access to your own energy system, because AI is the new electricity, really, right? And you want to have access to your own electricity. So it's not just us. Europe is thinking about having its own. France has Mistral, for instance. China has shown what it can do, DeepSeek. So India, work is underway to create our own AI foundation model. Let's see how successful we are. But that same mindset is now moving from not just AI to also defense. Because when the US sells you an F-35, you cannot attack any country because they can literally stop you from doing that. China, its buses come. China exports its buses to Norway, and Norway's bus system can be literally stopped from China if need be. So all of us really want to secure our own borders and have sovereignty within ourselves. It cannot be if these digital switches, these skill switches, are with a foreign country. Even if it's a friend, that's fine. Okay. And, but if it's not a friend, it's worrying.
Okay.
So what we're really seeing is that trend accentuate across. You want energy self-sufficiency, you want AI self-sufficiency, you want manufacturing self-sufficiency, etc. So this is the broad trend that's underway, and this is how Germany is beginning to think. This is how France is beginning to think. This is how Europe is beginning to think. And in a bipolar world, which is America on one side and China on one side, we're of course aligned to the free world, but at the same time we are to be aligned to our own population and our own interests. And I think Europe is thinking about it. Similarly, India is thinking about it.
Okay, so it's more about everyone's thinking about it. So opportunity comes from scalability as well. So the scale of India and so on. Understood. Um, um, 2023 to 2025 is considered some sort of a reset era, not just in India, but globally as well.
Yeah.
We have gone through this downtrend, right? And the startup valuation, funding, and so on. India also saw this shift happening. Do you think this is kind of in terms of Indian startups, a kind of a cyclical setup, or it's more of a more maturing of the whole startup ecosystem? And do you see the startups now which are coming out much more aligned to being long-term driven than just growth conscious and growth chasing kind of startups?
Got it. I do acknowledge that there has been a reset, but I don't know if the reset's gone far enough. There was a brief reset when we moved out of the COVID-led bubble era.
Okay.
But what we've done is really, with a very brief break in between, quickly move to the AI bubble era. Okay. And is it a bubble? It's fairly a bubble, but is it like an unwelcome bubble? Not really. I think this is really, this is how I think capital markets have moved. And the truth is that um, there has been a mild reset. Like, interesting data point for you is that I looked at, before coming into the meeting, I looked at the last 10 months data on funding
in Indian ecosystem.
Yeah.
Okay.
This year, and I contrasted it with the previous year. So it's down 10%.
Okay.
It's down 10% number of deals and 10% in the quantum. So I would say about 12.5 billion across 1150 deals was the number last year, Jan to October 24. That same number is today 11.1 billion, so 10% down, and 1,000 plus deals, again 10% down. Okay, the per deal investment numbers remain consistent, 10.5 million ish, give or take 100K. So there has been a slight dampening in activity. And what we have really seen over the past few years is a tearing of the Indian venture ecosystem into two buckets. One is really the first time founder, who struggles, who pivots, etc. And there, I would say, typically seed checks start at like 1 million to 1.5 million. Sometimes there's a pre-seed before that. But really, the action has been in the elite founder, okay, who's we call the fluent founder, not the fresh founder. The fluent founder is typically a senior L1 of a unicorn or a second time founder. And there we've seen that they're able to raise anywhere from $4-5 million to 15 million, right? Depending on their profile, etc. So so structurally, we've seen a tiering of founders. And if you're a second time fluent founder, I don't think the laws of gravity apply to you as much as the laws as apply to a fresh founder. And what you're really seeing is this, I would say, reset was a very mild reset. But really, we're seeing much of the behavior that we saw in COVID, where there is scant attention to gross margins. There is a desire to grow. I think some of it is beginning to come back with this AI bubble underway.
Okay. So if you see there was very little correction, so to say, where was it most and where was it did not impact at all? So the valuation, funding amount, in one round, like where was this the biggest hit?
Yeah, I would say that where we are really seeing a correction, if I may say so, would be like which is non-AI, I would say non-quick commerce. Okay. These have been the two hot sectors. Anything that's not in this, there has been some moderation. Okay. And if it is, for example, edtech, without an AI, it's NGMI, not going to make it, right? So that's seen the highest correction. But if you have an AI, if you are an AI native startup in any sector, there is interest. But if it's very physical without like AI, then I think it's a little bit of a struggle to kind of raise capital. And I would say that if you are operating in AI and QCom, these two sectors, it could be AI such as a strong B2B AI with a vertical focus. It could be consumer AI, doesn't matter, like AI companion, doesn't matter. There is no correction there. In fact, if anything, valuations have gone up. QCom, Q-commerce, which is a very uniquely, very popular model in India, you're not seeing any kind of moderation. You're only seeing growth, and you're seeing valuations go up. It's the other part of it which is really kind of seeing more moderation, I would say. Anything in B2B marketplaces is looked at with more closer interest, closer scrutiny, because there is evidence that what models have worked, what models have not worked. And again, if it's manufacturing, it's defense, there is a lot of interest there as well. So it ties in with these themes that I said. Okay, so QCom, so I mentioned three themes earlier. I said the first theme is Atma Nirbharta, mouthful for your audience, I know, self-sufficiency. Okay, so self-sufficiency is leading to the manufacturing defense wave. The second one I said was the informal to the formal. QCom is a great example of that. Third is AI. Okay, and that is where the third element comes in. So these three sectors linking to the three structural trends are untouchable. They're really doing well. Like, they have no corrections. But the others, there's a little bit of moderation.
So, correct me if you're wrong, because you're very much connected to the US ecosystem. Understand very well what's happening over there. So, I see similar kind of trends happening over there as well. AI, obviously, valuations are high. Second-term founders, everything goes well for them, right? And there are US specific models which are gaining a lot of traction. For example, with India, it could be Atma Nirbharta and all those kind of topics which are gaining a lot of traction. Q-commerce, for example, is a very India-specific topic, as you mentioned. It's again gaining a lot of traction. There is no correction over there. Similarly, in US as well, there might be some sectors which keep on gaining traction, but others obviously have seen a lot of correction. So for the audience and for the LPs out there, it's just a matter of understanding there's a similarity between ecosystems when it comes to how the investments are happening and so on.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. There are a lot of parallels between India and US because in many ways, the Indian venture ecosystem was, I would say, booted up by VCs of Indian origin relocating from the US to India. And because of the English speaking and advantage that we have, and because of the fact that Indians, thanks to the IITs and engineering colleges, have very strong tech quotient, and they penetrated into Silicon Valley in the 70s and 80s. As they, after engineering college in India, they would go and do their masters or PhDs there, and then slowly move into the tech world. There was a lot of appreciation and enthusiasm for Indian origin founders, and naturally that led to VCs, Indian VCs, and a lot of them naturally asked, "Oh, is India the new China? Could India be the new China? Would you like to go and start an India office?" And in the late 90s, as there was a crazy tech boom, right? It's very similar to now, actually more boomier than now, and more frothier. A lot of Indian VCs from the US came and started up. And of course, they had to shut it down when the boom kind of tapered very fast. But that's kind of how the Indian startup ecosystem started. It was really, okay, is India the new China? Oh, there seem to be a lot of very successful Indian founders in the US. There'll be thousands more in India. Go there. And that's how the Indian startup ecosystem kind of started after the 98, 99 kind of, I would say, crash in 2000. 2006 is when the next wave happened. And I'm kind of a student of Indian venture history, and I kind of study these waves. And from 2006, so the Indian venture ecosystem is 2 decades old, okay? But fact is, there's always continuous exchange between Silicon Valley, okay, and India, okay? As a result, and this is sort of my perspective, that India has benefited from this exchange, from this advantage that we have, a lot more than we deserve to. And even now, I genuinely feel, and this is sort of
This is a strong opinion.
yeah, strong opinions weakly held. I'm happy to change my mind due to data, and this might come as an interesting perspective to your audience. But I genuinely feel the Indian economy is overventured. For the economy that we are, $2,800 per capita income, okay, 1.4 billion people, but just 4 trillion is our GDP. Japan, okay, whose per capita income has languished, is also 4 trillion, but with 1/10 the population that we have, right? So India, barring a tiny minority of 10%, that's it. This tiny minority of 10% is still, as Japan sized, is not a very affluent country and can't support a lot of startups and can't support a lot of TAM that the startups want. And I think this is one fundamental challenge that we are. And so while there are parallels, I think India has benefited from the US and Indian origin founders and VCs in the US. I generally feel that there's a lot more capital that's come into India than what the country deserves and can handle. And that leads to a lot of perverse incentives to chase growth, and which is hard to come by in India because there are only so many people who can afford to spend on those products. And so that leads to a lot of Indian startups looking at expanding beyond India to the Middle East, to US sometimes, so on. So lots of interesting second order effects, but I'll pause here.
Okay, that's very interesting because such kind of attitude towards, let's say, startups, it also exists in Europe,
Yeah.
to some extent, and also to some extent in the US. But we'll capture everything. So let's move on. Very briefly, if you have to pick three bold predictions for the Indian venture ecosystem for 2030, based on your report on Indus study report, for example, what would those be?
Yeah. Okay. I don't know if three readily comes to mind, but let me get started. So one interesting trend has been the globalization of the Indian venture ecosystem. You might find it interesting to note that many Indian VCs, including us, are actively investing in the US now. And some of the Indian venture funds are investing in non-Indian origin founders, like Peak 15 invested in Posthoc. Okay. And the Nexus, for instance, has been investing in like non-Indian founders as well. So we're seeing this very interesting trend where, just like I said earlier, that Indian startup founders are finding the Indian market too limiting for the capital that they've raised and are expanding into the Middle East or US. Indian VCs are also doing the same thing. There's so much capital, it's hard to deploy. And specifically when high quality founders of Indian origin are relocating to SF. So they are actually following these founders. And we've also done that. We have our partner now, Sanjay, who's based in SF, so that he can attend YC, he can meet these founders, he can have coffee with them at their time zone. And we've seen that pay off in being able to access high quality founders and deal flow. So this is one interesting trend. Happy to pause here.
No, but this is an interesting trend, but I assume you're saying it in a very positive way. Maybe not very positive, but at least in a positive way. Expansion not is not good in all the cases, but in this case, I mean, the US ecosystem has also expanded. The US VCs have also expanded. It's Sequoias of the world. They've expanded all across. They have funds all across the world, right? So why not the Indian ecosystem? Indian VCs can expand, and you're doing it beautifully, right? So same as with the Indian founders as well. So the US Uber, for example, very simple case. They have expanded everywhere. I use a simple Uber app in the US, in Europe, in India as well. Beautifully, it works flawlessly. So why can't, or why, I mean, why should the Indian founders not expand globally? So I assume that you're saying in a positive tone.
Yeah. I I'm neutral. I love that Indian founders are going to where the action is. I love that they're going and building high quality products. If it helps that by being in SF, you can build a better product, I'm all for it. Okay. So I have no objections at all. I said this as a very interesting observation of how the Indian ecosystem is beginning to kind of find its own water level, right? So water flows to where it's going to be used or where the low-lying land. So capital flows to where it's going to be used. And we're seeing both Indian founders and Indian VCs chase each other now in SF.
Understood.
Okay, yeah.
Understood. So Sajith, what would be the second one? Second bold prediction.
All right. Okay. Thinking on my feet. So the first was really about Indian founders and VCs chasing each other across. The second would be the emergence of a playbook for expanding beyond the top 10% of India. And now I want to just talk a little bit about understanding India. In my framework of the Indian consuming classes, I see India as three Indias, not just one India. And I think the single biggest mistake investors, including LPs, make looking at India is to say that, oh, it's 1.4 billion people. It's like the new middle class. Like, okay, that's the next China. I beg to differ. I would say that respectfully, and I'm a proud Indian, that need to explain that this 1.4 billion population can be split into three Indias. The India one is really the consuming India. Really. That's the Indians who you see in malls using Apple iPhones, watching Netflix, drinking Starbucks, etc. There's about 10%. So about 30 million households, and they have per capita income of, I think, around $10,000 to $15,000, right? So I would say that's like a Mexico, which is similar population, similar per capita income, or a Russia. Okay, that's okay. So second, India too. Uh, India too is not as familiar with English as India one is. They work as Uber drivers. They work as urban company staff coming home and doing a beauty treatment for you. They work as sometimes manufacturing line people. Okay, their incomes tend to be a lot more precarious than India one. They're not white collar class yet. This one is the size of Indonesia, about 300 million large, and has a per capita income of Philippines, $3,000. So India too, the story, the fascinating story of India over the last decade, since 2016, was internet prices fell dramatically thanks to Jio, right? And then phone prices became cheaper, smartphones became cheaper, okay? And very interesting frictionless payment mechanisms came. Uh, uh, I call this a Wang trifecta after a Chinese founder, okay, who actually said that the Chinese economy took off when three things happened. Frictionless payment system, thanks to Alipay and WeChat, smartphone in every pocket, and rock bottom internet rates, okay. And same three things happen in India, and we saw the entry of 300 million consumers, but actually they're not consumers, they're users. They're avid watchers. They don't pay as much into the Indian startup ecosystem. And a lot of founders started catering to them. But truly, what happened is you had to recreate the business models to kind of cater to these. And over the last 3-4 years, we have seen the maturing of a playbook to cater to India too, as distinct from the playbook which caters to India one. India one is a mini US, right? Is a smaller version of US, a little less richer version of US, like a Mexico. But India too is very distinct. So how do you cater to them? For instance, one of the founders of Dream 11, which is a very popular cricket betting company, which unfortunately kind of had got into trouble recently thanks to the Indian government changing the laws on banning real money gaming. So the founder of that, a very, very insightful founder called Harsh Jain, made a very interesting comment. He said that when Dream 11 says when you cater to India too, or Bharat as it's called, you shouldn't charge 300 rupees a month. Instead, he said, you should charge 10 rupees every day for 30 days. You'll have a lot more customers. So it's a sachet pricing, right? Like how India, people don't have a lot of money. People prefer to kind of buy in smaller sachets. So sachet pricing, something called UPI auto pay, which makes it very easy to kind of UPI itself, which is a frictionless payment rails, voice as a way to kind of access Indian consumers. And a lot of these playbooks have emerged and matured. And as a result, you have very interesting startups emerging. Like, for example, I would say in the media and entertainment space, Cuckoo FM, Ilo, Stage, these are all have created these models to kind of vernacular content and very distinctly Indian kind of product hooks, okay, which appeal to Indians. Then, for instance, Rapido Rapido, for example, has two-wheelers. It's like Uber, but two-wheelers. And now it's slowly become the number two to Uber, and some say it'll overtake Uber. Misho, out of nowhere, is a very interesting model. No commission, okay? They make money through ads and logistics. So they have pioneered very interesting playbooks. And the India 2 playbook has really emerged in the last few years. Right. So this is, I would say, the second trend.
The bold prediction is there will be a lot more startups.
Oh yes, there will be, because playbooks have started to emerge. There's some fascinating startups. So, for example, there's a startup called Friend, FRND, right? So they are like Tinder for India, India too. But very interesting. It's you would think Tinder for India too would be like swiping, etc. No, because in small town India, it's not easy to talk to the opposite sex. Okay, it is getting easier, but it's not easy. So there's a lot of fear of talking. So they say, first, let's get you to talk. So they've created a system by which two people can play games with a chaperone in between, and then you pay a little extra to talk. So very interesting model. Sri Mandir, which you can do puja, okay, and chadawa, like, remotely. So the very distinct models emerging, and I think over the next 5-6 years, we're going to see more and more of these models. So these are, I think, the top two, I would say, trends that I'm seeing. Um, if you want me to look at the third, I would say very related to the first is a very interesting trend that I see of Indian startups um, uh, attacking the global market in two ways. One is that you start in India, you perfect the product, and if you India one in many ways is a 51st state of the US. I refer to it as yeah. Because they're watching all the same serials, Suits, Friends, they're drinking Starbucks, they're watching Netflix. They're very Americanized, right? It's California but in Bangalore or Bombay, right? So launch your startup in Bandra, in House Cars, Gurgaon, in Indiranagar, okay, and then take it to the US. And that's, for example, Vadam Tea, that's, for example, Ultra Human, and so on and so forth. Then I'm seeing a very interesting, bold trend of Indian founders thinking global from day one. Before coming here, I actually had a pitch from a very like a solid elite L1, which is like a CXO from a very large unicorn, and he's actually thinking global from day one. This is very bold. Yeah, this didn't exist. So I love that they're thinking grow from day one because they're saying, look, AI levels the playing field. Um, a couple of decades back, Thomas Friedman wrote the world is flat, right? It's the same thing. AI has made it even flatter. And Indian founders are going to take advantage of that. So these are, I think, the three trends that I see.
Understood. Let's move to the topic that you mentioned quite a lot,
Yeah.
which is a consumer and e-commerce with respect to India, right? So if you can very briefly explain the Indian flywheel, commerce flywheel. And a lot of people, when they look towards India, they always think about quick commerce, which doesn't exist in Germany.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. And it would never probably, is quick commerce in India in a ball? So that would be my question. So explain the flywheel and is it a ball?
Yeah. So quick commerce is basically delivery in 10 minutes. Sometimes it takes 30 minutes. And it was pioneered by I think the first announcement was a company called Zepto, but very quickly a company called Blinkit came out from back behind to kind of overtake them, and they're the largest in India today. There's Blinkit, there's Instamart, by Swiggy, and Zepto. But what also we are seeing is Flipkart, Amazon are worried that quick commerce has grown so much that it'll eat up e-commerce. So they've also started faster delivery. Even vertical players like Nykaa, Lenskart started faster delivery. So what we are seeing is the evolution of e-commerce into quickish commerce. Sometimes very quick, sometimes less quick. So people are able to get even iPhones in 20 minutes, 30 minutes. That's it. Quick commerce works in India because of a few factors. One, very cheap labor. I mentioned how India one is just 10% of this. So there's a lot of population who are happy to do work of coming on their bikes, taking something, delivering and coming back. And they work for, right now the wages in the quick commerce space are 100 rupees an hour. 100 rupees an hour is $1.25. Okay, so you can translate that into euros. So that is very low, right? In Europe, it would be like, even with immigrants were to do it, it would be like 5x or 6x.
Yeah, it's completely not possible
Not possible. Okay. And it only works in India because of a few factors. High density. Okay, because India has a lot of density, and it's 1/6 of the world's population packed into just a country which is 1/3 the size of China in area, or 1/3 the size of Canada. So it's a very small country geographically. It has a lot of population, so it's very dense, and our cities are very dense. And there's a lot of gated communities, which are like mini townships. Okay, so quick commerce allows you to, so that reduces the logistics burden, reduces the logistics cost, and cheap labor means you can, like, you use that advantage of density to kind of that to deliver. So without this, quick commerce would not take off. And these are the underlying conditions in the petri dish for quick commerce to kind of take off. And which is why you've struggled to see some of these models. They started in the US, in Europe, but very haven't worked. So, but quick commerce is right now about 10% overall of Indian e-commerce. Indian e-commerce breaks 70, 80, 70, $75 billion and give or take 5-10 billion. It's very hard to estimate. Quick commerce will be roughly about 10% of that. Yes, it is the fastest growing segment. Um, and and this is sort of the flywheel works is the basic quick commerce model is that you have dark stores, and these dark stores are in neighborhoods, and typically in these neighborhoods you set up like a 3,000 to 5,000 square feet store. You stock it with 3 to 8,000 SKUs, and these SKUs could be grocery, could be packaged foods, could be beauty products, could be even chargers, and not even small things that you would not expect, like a USB-C to kind of a USB-B charger. Like, even you get even those kind of things. You get skipping ropes, like sports equipment, etc. So I, I do feel that we started out with 3 to 4,000 SKUs and have rapidly expanded to 8 to 10,000 SKUs. Dark stores have gotten bigger, and these dark stores allow you to kind of deliver in about 10 to 15 minutes, right? And but the concern that I have is there's a lot of money that's come into QCom, right? But when you look at the Indian economy and past kind of consumer product stories, food delivery is another one. Food delivery everybody was excited about food delivery at one time. They thought, etc. We've seen that finally you hit the limits of the consuming class in India. And there are only about 30 million people in India, right? 30 million households in India, which have purchasing power that can sustain a large quick commerce company. Now there are 3 and more coming in. So everybody's after the same household. And when we looked at the data, we found out that India has about 19,000 zip codes, pin codes, and only less than 1,000, but 5% of them have organized retail of more than 5 stores. It's kind of a proxy for affluence. We also looked at another data set. There are about 780 districts in India. Like, okay, these districts, only less than 10% have per capita income greater than $2,000 per annum, per annum, and density of more than 500 people, which is able to sustain a quick commerce one. So these are some of the challenges that we see, that yes, there's a lot of money coming in. Okay, and yes, we will see innovatively more and more dark stores being opened, but you are beginning to hit the limits of growth slowly. And we are seeing that, and even like for quick commerce, the top 8 metros account for like 60-70% of revenue. And we are beginning to see orders stagnate. And we covered that in the Indus Valley report. And these are my concerns on quick commerce. I'm bullish on quick commerce. We have invested in one.
So you're still bullish?
Oh, yes.
Commerce overall as well as quick commerce?
Yeah.
But there are obviously some niches that you think that...
Yeah. So we do think that quickish commerce is here to stay, and we're going to see faster and faster deliveries, no doubt about it. We bullish about some aspects of vertical commerce. We invested in a company called OZ, which is in the baby care space. So and sort of, you can think of it as a Coupang of India, like, but beginning with baby care and kids care, because that's a very urgent need. Has a lot of long tail things, from for example, certain types of formula, like lactose intolerant formula milk, not easy to get. Then, for example, a certain type of feeding pillow, Okay, it has, for example, a high AOV, average order value, okay, and high repeatability. So these are fertile conditions for a vertical play to emerge, and we're bullish about it. And we invest in OZ, and they've already quickly raising their Series A, and we're bullish about a few other sectors as well, which I can't name here, unfortunately, because but. But I continue to be bullish. But at the same time, I want to be cognizant of the fact that we'll be very careful that we don't over kind of fund these companies. That's my only worry. Yeah.
So just continuing this deep dive on the ecosystem, what's your take on SaaS and the Indian SaaS ecosystem? When AI came in the US, a lot of people are thinking that AI is kind of a SaaS killer, right? Uh, when we talk about India, there are a lot of SaaS-based founders who build their company and wanted to scale to the US as well. So within this overall ecosystem, do you think the Indian SaaS ambitions are intact? Are they breaking? And is the SaaS founders more selective when they're starting the companies now and choosing which areas to focus on?
Yeah. So, if you look at the Indian SaaS ecosystem, there were very few well-funded Indian SaaS players who were selling only into India. There were a few, but there were very few, and they're mostly selling into the US, uh, especially the funded ones. And today, you can't go with a pure SaaS solution to the US unless you're selling to less uh, well-known and boring industries like plumbing or something like that, or funeral homes or something like that, right? Uh, it's all AI. And so the Indian SaaS ecosystem has adapted very quickly and has furiously pivoted or now moved to being AI. And even if you're doing a SaaS company, you are very quickly creating AI toolkits and you are rebranding yourself as an AI native company. And we need to kind of keep this in mind that if you are a pure SaaS company, unless you're seeing record growth, it's very difficult to get funded.
Even in India.
Even in India. Yeah. Pure SaaS companies will be dead on arrival. They're all rebranding themselves to AI because AI also now enables new forms of UI. For instance, our portfolio company, which sells to US distributors. US distributors have longed for products which the US D2C slash B2C companies have, e-commerce companies have, like Shopify. So Shopify, Magento, they all tried to create solutions, but they haven't worked. So distributors need a lot of very interesting things, differentiated pricing, masked pricing, multiple SKUs, multiple things. So lots of complication, right? And all of that makes it very hard to use a Shopify. And so this company was offering this product. So it's like a B2B Shopify, but very superior, very customized. And they found out that they were getting growth, but investors were asking them, what is your AI strategy? So very quickly they said, let's try and solve our customers' problems. So they said, we will, and what are the biggest friction point for the customer is order entry, because orders come as emails, order come as messages, order come as like maybe even not faxes anymore, but there are verbally communicated on the phone line, etc. So what they've done is to create an AI agent which just listens in and takes these orders, and people can just speak into it and these orders and frictionlessly creates it, reducing people needed. And so you're creating because you can understand all of the workflows very deeply. You are able to create these AI agents to just frictionlessly attack. So they've created an AI agent for orders. They've created an AI agent for photography, and they're beginning to see traction. So this is how SaaS companies are adapting. If you're only SaaS today, it would be very challenging. You have to layer on AI toolkits and rethink how UI will be in this era.
Okay, got it. So Sajith, I mean, you discussed about AI, right? So we talked about SaaS founders and how they're kind of adapting, being agile in this AI first narrative. They're building for the US. And as you said, the SaaS only model doesn't fly these days, neither in the US nor in India. But when it comes to AI in itself, AI as a topic, where does India stand as compared to the US versus China? Do you think we have some catching up to do, or the train has already left and there's no way we can catch up to the US and China? And the second question would be, in this scenario, if you're not able to catch up, has India developed its own toolkit? For example, the application there, and not focus more on the infrastructure side, which, for example, all the big companies, Magnificent Seven, are just focused on building a lot of infrastructure and models and so on. So where does India stand in the entire kind of AI ecosystem?
Yeah. I would say that we're well behind the West and China, primarily due to the fact that we don't have a density of scientists. When I say scientists, I mean researchers, AI researchers, computer scientists. Uh, we don't have that density of high quality research minds in one place in India. And it's only, I would say, the West, primarily US, but perhaps UK, Cambridge, etc., and maybe France, Paris, which has some density. Okay. Uh, but it's largely the US and China which have sufficient density, and which is why you're seeing the biggest advances come out of there. The best Indian AI minds are in SF.
Mhm.
And it's challenging now, not easy to bring them back unless the government or some Indian company makes highly concerted efforts. So it is very challenging to create foundational models, LLMs, AI infra on par with what we have seen in US and China. I don't think we're anywhere, even if Sarvam, for instance, which is making a Indian LLM, comes out, it'll be anywhere close to the SOTA models, the state-of-the-art models that we have in US and China.
So what's the India play then? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I would say that the India play will manifest in downstream applications of technology. So I always say that the biggest beneficiaries of electricity was not GE as much as Coca-Cola, right? So they made more money and their market cap was much higher than GE's. So if AI is the new electricity, then who is the Coca-Cola who benefits from unlimited cheap electricity, too cheap to meter? So we'll see very interesting companies emerge, and Indian founders should look at downstream applications of the technology. There could be interesting middleware applications, layer, but as of now, I'm likely to bet that there could be very interesting applications native to India and native to the Indian population, which will emerge with unique AI for India. Could be voice. Lots of Indian startups in the voice space, and that could lead to very interesting data sets. And that's where India has an advantage. With 1.4 billion people, that's a humongous amount of data that's getting created. And that could be the interesting advantage for Indian startups. If I would say an Indian startup should today start with leveraging the two Ds, data and distribution. You have access to 1.4 billion people. And right now, AI is not reaching all of them in the way it's intended.
Mhm.
And how do you get AI to reach them and benefit them? Two, data. How can you leverage this entire population used with AI to train AI and create the next, perhaps, model that could emerge? So these are ways in which I think Indian founders could take advantage. They can't play the same game that the Chinese research labs and the US research labs and the US large AI companies are playing. They just move too fast ahead. What they can do is to look at the Indian market and see if there are native use cases. And for example, it could be in vernacular language. Let's say an Indian wants to query the government or talk about help from the government. You could have a tool whereby a person can speak in, and the government can detect, oh, this area needs some correction or coverage, and you can try and kind of service that. And or for instance, some person can ask, what are my benefits if I am this community, this thing, I have this, are there any benefits I can get? And then the app can say, yes, you are entitled to this benefit, press this button to access this, and you connect your bank account, etc. It could be around, for example, lending, or so there could be very interesting use cases emerge, and we'll have to see what those are. And yeah.
And Indian VCs, have they uh, got this train of AI investing already? Are they like aware, and are they investing into this era?
They are very aware, and in fact, they are hyper aware of AI. And like I said, they've already started investing in AI in Indian founders, but many of them are in the West. The best Indian founders are there. If they see an opportunity here, they'll quickly move, adapt. There's a lot of money. Okay. I don't think, like I said, the Indian venture ecosystem is over-ventured. So there's a lot of money, and that will get deployed in AI, because that's the next big wave. And that wave seems to continue. There may be a crash in the near distant future, but I don't think it's a long term crash. Long term, I'm very bullish.
Okay. A side question to what you mentioned this twice now, being over kind of venture or over, there's money. When I compare this to Europe, in the sense, Europe had an issue with the earlier stage capital. So there was a lack, like a decade or 2 decades back, lack of capital over there. But European funds have grown, and now there's enough capital, at least in the seed and Series A stage, right? What Europe lacks is this growth capital and late stage capital. It still lacks, even though European institutional investors have a lot of capital, right? So all that late stage capital is still coming from the US. Do you see the same issues, bifurcation, when it comes to the Indian startups as well? So when you talk about there's too much capital, let's say, not too much, but still more capital, it's only you're talking about the early stage and not the late stage.
No, there is capital across. And that said, like there are multi stage funds which have international parent or an international association. And they, for example, Lightspeed, or there is RTP Global, etc., which are able to kind of play across a general catalyst. These are present in India, present in, of course, the parent is in the US, and they are playing in the late stage. And there are lots of US players who otherwise track India and then come in early growth to, like Green Oaks, for instance, Cotu. Uh, they are a tiger. They all move when they see an opportunity. There's no shortage of capital if you have growth in India. Okay, I don't know enough about Europe, but it's fair to say that growth capital is still US. So that's where the big money is. And India doesn't have large native capital pools. The entire venture, this thing, is largely from US LPs, right? US and some European LPs like Sofina, etc. But otherwise, it's largely US money. So that continues.
So late stage game is still the US funds, which are global, multi-stage, and so on. So Sajid, let's move to the LP specific section. So how do LPs understand and misunderstand Indian investing, risk and return of the Indian venture investing? Because your fund might have a lot of US and European LPs as well. So when you discuss with them, what's the risk return profile? They are mostly, let's say, I wouldn't say unaware of, but kind of misunderstand.
Yeah, we do have some European LPs, not too many, and mostly US and again Southeast Asian and Middle East. So say that when we get money from US, that money is really, I would say, the tail of high risk capital. So, for example, the tail of high risk capital. I'll explain. So, when you take, for example, like a CalPERS or a Ontario Teachers or a Texas Firemen, any of these large funds, pension funds, or take any name, Yale University. Primarily, there are certain obligations it has to meet. Like Yale will need 5% of its corpus to cover tuition costs, etc., research costs, etc. And so you have some monies in like bonds, some money in real estate, some money in US equities. So bulk of it is in home. Then it looks at other asset classes and it looks at international and look at venture and tech because tech has given a lot of returns. And a lot of it is US tech. And then it carves out X 10, 5, 10, 15, 20% for that. And of the 20% that goes to tech, bulk of it goes to US, some of it goes to Europe, and a little of it comes to Asia. The little that comes to in Asia again gets split across maybe China, etc. And so India gets really the tail risk. And when money comes from US securities, they are really taking frontier risk. They're fundamentally saying, go for it, go big, like take more risk. Some of the multilaterals tend to like if it's an impact fund, if it's like a like a sovereign fund, then they have certain impact objectives as well, and they're okay with if it meets those impact objectives around employability and a few other things, climate and all that. But otherwise, the money that's coming into India is really frontier capital. It's really saying go big because it's like money that's going into crypto. I don't care if you lose it, but if it wins big across all the funds, I it should win really big. So I think LPs do want us to chase exciting companies. That said, LPs have been very gracious and have been tolerant of our of the Indian venture ecosystem, but they've not seen DPI, which is the money back. And now we're beginning to see the few IPOs that we've had. We're beginning to see some of the money go back, and that should help create kind of comfort, and more money should come in. But if you had said till about 2 years back, we typically said this is great, India is great, it's a great promising thing, but where is the DPI? When today beginning to see with the IPOs DPI, and in our portfolio itself, we are beginning to see almost every year one big company go IPO. So that's a thing. So I would say for LPs, we're grateful of the LP interest in India, and because without that, venture funds wouldn't happen, without that, tech investing wouldn't happen, without that, great founders wouldn't have come in, etc. But and this is sort of, I would say, the broad attitude. I haven't interacted specifically with the European LPs to see if there's a difference, but with US LPs, probably two camps. With US, if it's like if it's a US LP, they want risk. They're coming to you because they want like binary outcomes. You want power law outcomes. If it's like a impact LP / sovereign fund, then there are certain developmental goals they want you to meet.
Okay.
Return is important, but those goals are also important. They don't want you to invest in certain areas. Okay, and these are some of the two perspectives.
So just a side question. You mentioned IPOs. Are you bullish on IPO exits for India for Indian startups in the next couple?
Yes, we've had a wave of very exciting companies. Urban Co, Meesho is next, etc. Grow of late. Some solid companies kind of have come. More will come. India is one of those markets where I feel there is going to be IPOs of high quality companies. Whereas in the US, you're actually seeing extremely high quality companies stay private. Stripes of the world, OpenAIs of the world, Anthropics of the world, Databricks of the world. We begin to see these 100 billion plus valued late stage private companies, almost like quasi public, but not yet public. So there's a lot of exits possible. The early stage guys in that can go out. People have come in 5 years back and get an exit, but it's not an IPO yet, right? So in India, those for various reasons, we're still some few years away from that. So many of these high quality companies like Razor Pays of the world, they're all kind of going to get come into the IPO market soon. So India is a great place for IPOs for the next 1, 2, 3 years.
One myth that you would like to bust for the LPs who are new and looking to India business?
Yeah, so I would say that one area in which I think we would benefit from LP this fund is to say that that India is a country which compounds, but a little more gradually. Okay, so because of the nature of the Indian ecosystem, it takes time for companies to hit PMF, product market fit. It takes companies time to grow, to expand beyond India, etc. And if I've seen some of the interesting journeys of the Indian startups, 10 years, sometimes a little on the lower side, but 12, but if they see it as a 12-year fund, actually 10, 11th and 12th year is great. And the 13th and 14th and 15th year is even greater. So my request to European piece would be that um, if you have a slightly longer term outlook, and I understand that IPOs are important, DPI is important, etc. But once you get that exit, don't exit fully, exit partially and stay invested. These are very high quality companies and it's still day one, right?
Okay, so its post-IPO performance is still really, really good.
Yes. But you have to be patient a little bit. After the IPO, there will be some time when the stock will fall because existing investors all want to go. But there's some really high quality companies out there.
Okay. I mean, just to clarify, European venture game is a 15-year game. It's not 10-year.
That's lovely. That's lovely. Yeah.
Good. Okay. So Sajith, we are almost through. This is the last part where we kind of try to predict. I know nobody has a crystal ball, but we try to kind of predict the future, what lies ahead for all of us. So in context of the Indian ecosystem, if Blume was to kind of redesign the whole Indian ecosystem right now, what would be a couple of things that you would stop doing? Would you try to kind of eliminate from the ecosystem right now if you had to redesign?
Yeah, I would say that one of the challenges for the Indian startup ecosystem has been that while the Indian government is broadly supportive, there tends to be a lot of action with regards to the Indian startup ecosystem. Like, for example, the ban on real money gaming, the views on crypto, some very puzzling interpretations on taxation, which create a little bit of uncertainty. And I would say that those are areas where I would say, I would love it to be stopped, or I would love a more greater clarity coming in from the government. Okay. No doubt, they're listening. They know that the Indian startup ecosystem is actually one of the engines of job creation.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
They have been saying it quite a lot.
Yes. And one of the big success stories of the Indian startup ecosystem is with regards to creation of a gig economy class, which is 10 million plus strong, across ride sharing, ride hailing apps such as Uber, Ola, Rapido, to, I would say, the Delivery, which is a company which does e-commerce delivery, and other players like that, Shadowfax and so on, to, for example, quick com players, food delivery, urban company which does skilling, etc. So all of this has created a lot of jobs. And so the government recognizes that the Indian startup ecosystem is a job creation engine and should work a little more closely to support, and should come with a trust first viewpoint. They should believe that, hey, uh, like not everything is perfect, but the intent from our side is to do something great for the nation. And we would love for the government to work with us directly. At this point, I think the government's intent is great, but bureaucratic interpretations lower down tend to be a little more stick. So those are areas where I would love, for example, something to be stopped.
Okay.
Yeah.
But overall, do you feel that the government support towards the ecosystem has increased tremendously? Because at least in the media, you tend to feel that there's a lot of initiatives happening. There's a lot of bilateral kind of visits and so on and so forth are happening.
Yeah.
There's a lot of support as well. Obviously, those topics of clearer regulations or very board support is always there, right? But I assume that this has increased.
Absolutely. It has increased and it's welcome. Lots more funds from the government coming into the startup world, etc. So, sovereign capital. I think the government recognizes that it's important to support the startup world because, for example, when he spoke about sovereignty / Atma Nirbharta, we saw that you want to create your own AI model, then it's a startup world which has to kind of step up. So government recognizes that, and it's much appreciated, and it's required as well.
Okay. So now for the next question, if you have to imagine 2 years down the line, the early stage ecosystem where you are investing, how would it evolve? Do you see more funds coming in? Do you see more discipline? Do you see from discipline from the startup side, for example? Or do you see, let's say, more specialization from the VC's angle as well?
Yeah.
So how can you paint the picture of the future?
Yeah. No, you've kind of put it well. All of what you mentioned is happening. Okay. So if I take the last point, we are seeing the rise of specialist funds. For example, there's a fund which only invests in defense and manufacturing called Industrial 47. It's a small fund. For example, there's a AI only fund called Activate emerging. There is there is, for example, deep tech focused funds emerging, etc. So um, along with it, there is a lot of micro VCs, which are these smaller size funds, 10, 20, 30, 50 million funds emerging. We are also seeing a lot more like willingness of foreign funds to look at India, seed, and especially as a second time founder, elite founder. We are beginning to see some of them directly play in these founders. Because these founders are able to access them thanks to their network, especially elite founders. So all of this happening, I don't see any single new development. It's just maturing and evolution of what is already there. The one thing I said was interesting was Indian VCs playing in the US, right? I think that we'll start seeing. The Indian venture ecosystem is actually an interesting knowledge, like I would say, like just if you can imagine, for example, one core pillar of the knowledge economy is consulting, right? So or another is lawyer, right? So similarly, as service class, it's smaller in size, but very high in importance is venture. And the Indian venture ecosystem has very high quality talent. And what you're seeing is that high quality talent is now getting exported and is working on global kind of playing at the global scale and playing in the US. That is very interesting. So Indian founders, and many of them are expanding beyond the Indian founders itself.
True. That's true. So maturing from every single direction that they can think of.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's the right way to put it. Yeah.
Okay, good. Last question from my side.
Yeah.
Complete the sentence. Building a legendary Indian startup in 2025 and beyond is really about
A deep understanding of the Indian consumer or the global consumer, and adapting AI and AI toolkits to helping them meet that need. Sometimes unspoken, sometimes verbalized.
good. Sajith, thank you so much for joining in and covering like a huge breadth of topics, right? You started from what is Blume doing, how your reports, tremendous, by the way, tremendous effort for
Thank
so
you.
many years.
Thank you.
Insight first approach is really well appreciated, especially with the institutional investors. So you're doing an amazing job there. Explaining what India is. India is not one. India is one. India 1, 2, 3, right? Explain the trends, what is going on and how the future looks like, ecosystems, e-commerce, as well as SaaS, how AI is going to play along. So we covered a lot of topics. Thank you so much for joining me today.
It was such a pleasure, Rohit. Thank you for having me.
Thanks.
Yeah.